It's incredibly difficult to follow up on a fantastic first season. Expectations are through the roof, and so writers are given significantly less time to breathe and set things up. And when it comes to Frieren Beyond Journey's End, I'm a prime example of someone with astronomical expectations. The first episode of Frieren's second season just came out, and I found myself being that unreasonable audience member, desperately hoping for them to wow me right off the bat. Instead of a jaw-dropping masterpiece, I got something much more reasonable. It was pretty good. And the more I thought about it, the better it seemed. This is a show that I've argued in the past is famous for its unique pacing and density, feeling both slow and filled to the brim at the same time. And as I'm writing this, having just watched the first episode, I think there's two major focal points today. The many little moments that stood out in the first episode, and the way Frieren explores the expression of love. First, we're going to briefly cover those interesting standouts. Then we're going to delve into a recurring theme I saw throughout the episode. Welcome to Season 2 of Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei, and today we are once again diving into the fantastic world of Frieren. There were lots of really cool little moments in this first episode that if I don't fit in here, I don't know when I'd be able to talk about. Take for example the obvious symbolism behind flowers and petals across this entire series that is then incorporated into Season 2's opening. Frieren holds onto a blue petal which has been used in the past, especially episode 2 of the first season, to represent her relationship with Himmel. At the end of the opening, a purple and red petal fall into her hands. I think that's pretty cool. In the same way, I think it's awesome that the opening of Season 1 and Season 2 both have matching shots. Frieren looking at the sky, riding in the cart, and reading her book. I think this episode's central conflict is really interesting. The story introduces a magic nullifying crystal that's worth a fortune that they stumble upon, but Fern advocates that it's a safety risk and they choose to leave it behind. Eventually, a party falls into a cave full of them. Frieren, through this little diatribe, explores this really cool world-building concept that these crystals exist beyond human intervention. They're too tough to be mined through practical means. Stark hits it with all of his force and doesn't leave so much as a dent, and because of their nature as magic nullifying, they can't be mined through magical means. So stuck in a cavern where neither Frieren or Fern can use magic, Stark is their only form of defense. I mean, the main conflict of this episode has to do with this environment. But leading up to it, we get this awesome scene where Fern expresses that in having her magic stripped away from her, it feels like she's lost one of her senses. They represent that through sound design, cutting away the background and leaving her in this void of black. I think it's interesting that maybe part of the reason Fern advocated initially for them to leave the crystal behind was not only for safety, but also potentially because of that dysphoric feeling. There's also this beautifully animated flashback of the former heroes' party fighting against a dragon too strong for them. While the animation is both outstanding and incredibly satisfying, the thing I want to talk about from this scene is how they hide a little bit of information in the foreground. As the dragon roars, you can see Frieren's arm is hurt, and as we see Aizen jump in front of and deflect a flame attack from the dragon, we see Hyder healing Frieren's arm. I like when stories include information outside of the focal points of the shots. It feels more realistic to what an actual fight would be, not people taking turns, but everything happening at once. To me, it just showcases that Frieren once again is a story that's going to be told with a lot of delicate care. And a lot of those things actually end up contributing to the main argument of this video, because I want to look at how this episode explores character development for Frieren, Fern, and Stark, specifically comparing it to that popular theory of love languages. You know, quality time, gift giving, words of affirmation, physical touch, and acts of service. So to really apply it, first we should understand love languages. When it comes to psychology and understanding the human brain, there's a lot of pseudoscience. Things like Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, and love languages aren't empirically supported. However, I still think there's value in this as a language framework for helping you understand others. I think a lot of people aren't given very good tools to express themselves, especially when it comes to relationships and dynamics with others. For example, I've generally had a disposition against receiving and giving gifts. I've often experienced it as an expectation that adds a lot of pressure and difficulty surrounding birthdays and holidays rather than a tool that brings people joy. But recently my partner and I had a conversation where she expressed how important it was to her. For her, gifts around birthdays and holidays are a way of expressing that you've been paying attention to one another and care. It represents effort and understanding, and something as simple as the love languages framework helped me kind of process that. Where this applies to Season 2 of Frieren is in the cool parallel between the development of our main trio and love languages. Each of these three characters' arc can be directly tied to one of the 5 frameworks. Take for example the namesake of the show, Frieren. If I were to simplify this series down to one sentence, I'd say it's about Frieren recontextualizing her old adventure with the hero's party with a new one, which is part of what makes this first episode really fun. Remember how I talked about the primary conflict in episode 1 being stuck in a cave that removed Mage's ability to cast magic? Well, when a monster does eventually show up, we find out it's a pretty bad matchup for Stark. Well, Frieren recounts a previous experience where Himmel encourages the party to choose their battles, accepting that sometimes you need to run away. I'd argue the love language that applies to Frieren's experience this episode is quality time, where she's learning to value the shared experience she has with those she loves, being paralleled in these two separate experiences where she's being carried out of a dangerous situation, where in the first time she was stone-faced, the second she smiles. That's actually something I love about how this story seems to be progressing. I feel like we're seeing Frieren smile more. That apathy that we associate so strongly with her character hasn't disappeared, but it has started to transform. The second and very obvious version of love languages being associated with this episode has to do with Fern. She explicitly states that having had so many different things ripped away from her due to war, like her parents' lives, her home, and possessions, has heavily contributed to her deep appreciation for the objects she's been gifted across her journey. From the staff she received from Hyder as a child, to a wood-carved necklace she received from Kraft the monk. She has possessions she deeply values, which obviously ties into gift giving. A component I really appreciate about the writing of these character arcs is how they happen across the episode. This premise of Fern really valuing these items is introduced at first in the river, but eventually comes back later, when Fern in her room is smiling at these objects and thinking back about how when she was deeply uncomfortable in a compromised, dangerous position and Stark was the only person that could protect her, she held on to that bracelet. Each individual arc and previous aspects of both the episode and series as a whole are intertwined really beautifully. Frieren's story focusing on the shared experience of choosing to run away together, how Himmel had made that something joyful rather than a failure, and Fern's discomfort being eased by an item she values greatly are both tied to the central conflict, which also sets up the third arc we're going to be talking about today from the first episode, Stark and Words of Affirmation. The second to last video I released in my original Exploring Frieren series was titled, If You Love a Character, Let Them Go. I talked about how I thought it was a strong writing decision to have Stark at the end of the first season of Frieren Beyond Journey's End fall out of the limelight. I think sometimes running television shows work so hard to try to get everyone involved all the time that they never give enough space to breathe and tell really fantastic stories. Part of my justification for why I wasn't worried about Stark taking a back seat for a little while in the story was because I was convinced eventually they would give proper time and attention to his character. Because I think they showcased multiple times before doing so, giving properly great stories to even better characters. I think the focus of this episode was primarily on Stark. That doesn't mean they neglected the other members of the primary cast, but I do think he was given priority, and I wasn't alone in that experience. Multiple people echoed similar sentiments in the comment section of one of my recent community posts asking about the first episode. Stark's character is built off of a deep insecurity specifically around being a warrior, born into a society that deeply values strength and never being able to satisfy his father, especially in comparison to his perfect brother before him, built the first foundations for an obvious complex. Add in the fact that he ran when they were facing their implied deaths at the hand of a great demon, and it's pretty obvious why he has such complex feelings. Later, he trained under Aizen, the former warrior of the hero's party, and once again he was unable to meet the high expectations set upon him, and his characters introduced to the story completely terrified. Many of my biggest videos on Frieren were about specifically his character, so it makes sense that words of affirmation, especially from people he's learned to trust, are important for alleviating that anxiety and insecurity, encouraging him to take leaps of faith he's properly prepared for. There are two ways in which this is demonstrated in the first episode of Season 2. Both in Frieren's complete trust of Stark having lost her magic, but also in his heartfelt conversation with Fern on the balcony. In being given an opportunity to leave, Stark has a conversation with Verbal and their group. Afterwards, Fern approaches him in this beautiful scene on a balcony, not necessarily convinced he will leave, but concerned enough to check in and apologize. And they have this conversation that points back to the 5th episode of the first season. Stark tells her that when he was at his limit, it wasn't just Frieren that encouraged him. Fern told him a story of the first time she faced a monster. Terrified and overwhelmed, Frieren wouldn't intervene. until eventually she trusted her training and faced her fears. Frieren's a character that comes across as pretty guarded, but in this scene, her vulnerability and candor was enough for Stark to take his own leap of faith. I've used this metaphor in the past for storytelling of woven cords, small elements layered upon one another to build an intricate and beautiful product. And that's how I feel about this episode. The more I've sat with it, the more I feel like there is to talk about. This episode really comes together beautifully in that cave scene. One of the comments from that community post I made the other day captured this feeling I had during the episode really well. They said, "I love to see the emphasis on, quote, a party cannot function without trust by Frieren. It's just a great principle you never really hear anywhere else." Part of the value of Frieren's words of affirmation in completely trusting Stark is also how her actions parallel those words. They're not empty sentiment, they're lived experience, which also leads to the cool juxtaposition between Fern and Frieren's mindset in that cave, which can be contributed to tons of different personality traits with their characters. Fern, from a very early age, has been a highly capable mage, someone who can stay calm and collected in the face of pressure. And I believe a major component of that is because she's highly capable. She has agency in stressful situations, which means she has direction for all that nervous energy in those moments. But take away that foundation of magic, and she panics. Given how similar an archetype Frieren and Fern's characters are, I love these moments that differentiate them. Frieren's skill set as this kind of OP protagonist goes beyond just being a great mage, but specifically being an experienced adventurer, which beautifully ties back into her remembering the lessons she learned from Himmel and her previous party, and how she functions as a mentor for Stark and Fern. Like I said before, tons of small components stacked together to make something more beautiful. But kind of the final thing I really loved about this episode, especially with its focus on Stark, is how it recontextualizes running away. A big problem with Stark's lack of confidence isn't fear, but not having an accurate understanding of his limits or when he should push past them. I feel like episode 1 of season 2 as a standalone product was good, but in the context of the story before it and where it seems to be going, I think it was great. Thanks for watching. I'll be back next week with another video.